The truth about GPA, what colleges really calculate in 2025. My name is Ann LaFemina. I'm an educational consultant with JRA Educational Consulting, and I'm just going to give everyone a few minutes to come on in. We have a comment box, and shortly, once I start presenting fully, that means that I will not be able to see your comments. I'm going to be giving you my email, and you are welcome to email me, and I'm going to have questions at the end. So let's get started. Just stop sharing my screen here, and we will get underway. Okay. So, just if you're coming in, just wanted to reintroduce myself. My name is Ann LaFemina. I am an education consultant with JRA Educational Consulting, and I'm so happy you're joining me tonight as we're going to be talking about the truth about GPA, what colleges really calculate in 2025. Just so you know, as I go through my presentation tonight, I am unable to see any of your questions or comments, but I do encourage that you please ask questions, and I will definitely set aside time at the end of tonight's presentation to answer any of your questions. But in the meantime, if there's something that you would like to ask me as a follow-up, this is my email, Ann, A-N-N, at jraec.com, and I welcome any follow-up from tonight's presentation. We are broadcasting live tonight through Facebook and YouTube, but this will be recorded. So if you have a short amount of time to join us this evening and you need to hop off, that is absolutely okay, because we will be emailing you, and then we have all of our broadcasts live, recorded and sent out to all of our listeners. And also a little bit of notes here. We do also have handouts and downloads from the webinar, and you'll be able to access that at our scorewebinar.com. And the handouts will also be available to you from the email as the follow-up. So I am ready to get started. And again, if you're just jumping on, please put your comments and questions in the comment section, and I am happy to address them at the end of the conversation tonight. So we're talking about GPA, and the first thing I want to do is just give you a little bit of a language conversation here on what GPA means and GPA in context of admissions. And it's my hope that by the end of tonight's presentation that you will really understand how your GPA grade point average impacts admissions, admissions outcomes, and even enlist development, how it impacts your course selection moving forward, how it can impact scholarships, and then kind of understanding what I'm calling the even playing field. And I'll be moving on to that, what that looks like in admissions. And then another thing I want you to kind of walk away from that you may not have thought about when it comes to looking at your GPA or your grade point average or your high school transcript is the understanding and the importance of reviewing your high school profile. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we progress through the evening. All right, I'm going to just start with this even playing field because I think this is really important to understand. I think the last time I checked for 2025, there was over 26,000 high schools in the United States. Might have been pushing closer to 27,000, something very close to that. But every high school uses a variation in their grading system, and no two grading systems are the same from high school to high school. GPA calculations and calculating the totality of your coursework and your course weighting varies from high school to high school. Then another variable is that students oftentimes take courses maybe from multiple schools, meaning that now with students having the ability to access dual enrollment, or maybe even coming in transferring schools, or maybe even adding courses from outside sources. So this is another layer that can add to the complexity of transcripts. And then finally, this even playing field concept that I want to sort of highlight tonight is what drives this recalculation of GPA, your grade point average, meaning getting us to that standardized comparison of finding a way to even the playing field for each person who is being evaluated in the college admissions process. So we'll further that conversation. And then the other thing I want to introduce you to tonight in before we get going is so you understand this word core. Okay, so core is going to come up a lot tonight. The even playing field, GPA is grade point average, and now we're going to talk about core. So core kind of equates to two ideas. Core in GPA, meaning your academic grade point average based on core subjects. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. And and then the other core, and I have them both at 1 and 1 because they're equal. Core coursework, meaning what is core coursework or core subjects? That is those foundational classes that you take, for example, English and math, science, social sciences, and world language. So core GPA and core coursework somewhat go together, and you'll see what I mean as we progress. Another sort of variable in this discussion before I talk to you about, what this looks like in our current admissions arena is rigor of that curriculum, rigor of those core courses. And so that means that when it comes to some of our more selective or even just everything seems to be at a very strong playing field right now, right? Many of these schools are what is a safety, right? But when it comes to that, our more selective universities are always going to be looking for more of those rigorous core courses. And what do we mean by that? That would be taking that English, math, science, social studies, and then adding or taking it as an honors. IB, AP, advanced placement, ACE, which you see a lot in Florida, dual enrollment courses, which are those courses where you can take with a college while you're in high school. And then even if it's an advanced standard of classes, say, for example, going beyond the mandatory 2 years of a foreign language. Or a certain sequence. And we're even seeing an uptick in those computer sciences or programming courses. Those are all considered to be even a little bit more elite within a core course conversation. Now, looking at that GPA, right? So when you apply to college, what is one of the first things that colleges are going to be looking at, even in their most holistic review, when they're looking at more than just a transcript? But really, that first line that you need to get past is going to be your transcript. And right there, colleges are going to be looking at your GPA. But when they're looking at your GPA, they're going to get a sense of, where you're at. Obviously, the rigor of courses that you're taking or the classes that you're taking, right? Your transcript is that full record of all the coursework that you've done that counts as high school credit and those credits needed for graduation. And they're going to look at that in the context of who you are. And they're going to look at your GPA maybe in terms of upward grade trends. Um, and, especially unless you're a very consistent picture, but what does that look like? So the colleges or the admissions personnel are going to take your transcript as that first sort of line of defense when you go in to assess and gauge your performance. But it doesn't stop there. Okay, so let's take a deeper dive now. You've got some context of the conversation. Let's look at a little bit more specifically of what we're talking about. So, what I want to highlight a little bit moving forward here is not just me telling you what this looks like, but showing you what this looks like. And so, I'm going to take you through a couple of college websites so you have a further understanding of GPA in context and that even playing field, right? Okay, so this is right from the blogs of UGA, University of Georgia. And what they're trying to tell you in their blog is that we see so many transcripts. We see such a wide variety of grading scales. And to have that level of playing field as possible, they then recalculate your transcript based on a criteria that they set to even that playing field. Now, this varies from college to college. So I'm going to kind of show you what the basic would look like, right? But Georgia, University of Georgia, gives you right on their website how they go about the recalculation of your transcript. So when you submit to a college and you see your GPA, whatever that is on your transcript, that may not be the same that the college uses to assess you as a candidate. Now, before I further that and show you more of the examples, I thought this would be a great time to introduce you to what I'm talking about more specifically. And if you just joined me, let me just say that I cannot see the comments, but you are welcome to ask questions as we progress, and I will get to them at the end. All right, so if we look at this sort of breaks down maybe some core classes that a typical student would take, right? And so if we're looking at this column, ninth grade classes, 10th and 11th. But this chart helps to show you that different students, let's say, right, we've got all different high school transcripts coming in now. And so maybe this student in their transcript, they have letter grades with pluses or minuses, or this student in their high school may have number grades. This student, a B minus might equate to a 2.7 because maybe it wasn't an honors or weighted class. This one could be just a 2.7 again because it wasn't an honors. But this one may be converted to a 4.0, meaning a B equals a 3. And I'll show you that later. So this is how the colleges then try to extract some of this varying information to make that even playing field. Because, right, when you look at this, all of these types of different classes and courses equate to different things. Now, this on this far one would be that, even more looking at that even playing field, right? Because if you look at a class such as Algebra 2 Honors, HN, this would equate to maybe at some students' high school an A. Oops, let me get my cursor back here. And then, for example, that could have been a 93 in another high school. Or if the high school was not adding any weight to it in an unweighted without adding that honors point to it, that would be just a plain 4. And then if we kind of move forward to adding the weight of a class, that would give you that 4.5. Or just to give you the even playing field, an A equals a 4 without any weight. So that's a lot to digest. I'm going to further give you some information on that, but that is like what we are looking at to start. Now, if you notice in looking down here where I have my arrows, you can see that a total GPA in this, right? If you look at maybe the cumulative was a 91, but the core, meaning without adding any honors to it, could be an 89. And also just looking at those core classes, not including that phys ed, not including that art, okay? And then sometimes you can have colleges that even just recalculate based on grade levels. So we're going to see this in the University of California system, where they are just looking at actually a couple of years span, as opposed to even calculating or adding once we get into adding first semester senior year classes. So you can now see, just based on this one little variance in a lot here, what this looks like, how the same grades might look using different methods, and how this becomes a challenge for the colleges. Now, circling back to that, let me show you, as opposed to telling you, this was from the University of Florida on their admissions page this year. And what they're sharing with you is that here is their admissions profile, which you can see. This is obviously a very selective college, but they very clearly let you know that this range that they're showing you here, well, that turns out to be based on the core weighted 4.0 scale that UF calculates as part of their evaluation process. So you might find that you, based on your core, might be a little bit more in this range, or maybe not. And so learning what a college does in assessing your GPA for their admissions can be very helpful in course selection. It can be very helpful in picking the colleges. It can be just very helpful in learning and understanding how you're being evaluated to others in other high schools with either higher or lower GPAs. Now, what I like here is that UF gives you a clear explanation. Dual enrollment courses and academic core classes, and any AP, IB, or ACE class, they will add another 1.0 credit weight to that. So meaning that A, that could equal a 4, would actually be a 5. Then any pre-ACE, pre-AB, pre-IB honors or courses similar to that for their core classes, they will add a 0.5 credit weight to that. So meaning a typical A would then be on their recalculated scale of 4.5. So knowing your GPA, where you think that you see it on your transcript, may be completely different in the review process. Another example, here is that word recalculated, University of Michigan. Now, right on their website, they tell you, we don't use a weighted GPA scale. And oftentimes students, when they are sharing their high school GPA is reported as a weighted GPA, not all, but mostly. So you may believe that you have a higher GPA than you do, but when University of Michigan goes to recalculate talking or going through your transcript, then you could see that it's a little bit different because they're looking at not adding those weights. Okay. Now, they do make it perfectly clear that they also, in evening that playing field, they then look at the number of demanding rigorous courses separately. And the rigor of your curriculum is then another piece in their review. Very interesting, right? Okay, this is another example of a college Augustana, just because I think it's important for you to see. Um, wow, this is something I was not aware of. And these are all from 2025 websites, okay? So they're saying as part of their application review, we recalculate your grade point average to include academic courses only. So this is also a really good time while you're looking at this University of Minnesota screen to say, or to help that you're sort of in a nuanced way thinking as I'm going through, wow, in planning my high school program, if I want to present the highest GPA that I can, it's going to do me, serve me well in my selection to do elective or participate or elect courses that fall under core classes, right? Because you know that the college will look at those in their calculation much more than they will in those electives that don't follow under core. Okay. And again, here we are where this is another example, right? You're showing your weighted and you see that your weighted GPA is higher. But the University of Minnesota shows in sort of for some of their programs what the mid-range GPA and test scores were for a recent, I think, class of 2024. And what they're saying is that we are looking at your unweighted recalculated GPA. And of course, this is sort of the same language that we just pulled, from looking at Michigan as well. So very interesting. And then finally, just to sort of get to this, where is this going, right? And so again, another, example, UPenn, where they say, we encourage you to consistently take classes in core academic areas throughout your 4 years of high school. Well, that's just not necessarily for UPenn, but that is advice and practical advice that we give for our students, because we do feel like that helps in that ending of having that stronger GPA, whether it's looked at weighted or unweighted. But one thing that leads me to our conversation is that every high school is different, as I share, but we review your school's profile to best understand the types of courses available to you, your school's grading scale, and the ways you challenge yourself. Now, that is really important, right? Because in that context, in the high school profile and GPA, this is an important conversation. I often talk to my students and families when I first meet them and get to know them and ask them about their high school profile. Can you share your profile of your high school's profile with me? And oftentimes, families go, what's that? And I understand that because it's not always highly publicized. But high schools are obligated to put together a document for the purpose of college admissions that gets attached to your Common App or your application that gives colleges the true understanding of your high school, everything from demographic information to your grading scale, to all the courses that you offer, to GPA distribution. And some high schools give you a very extensive amount of information, some don't. But the school profile is an important document for you and for the colleges. So how is it important for you? Well, it gives you a window to say, in looking at my own high school's profile, what are all the courses that I've taken and how do I stack up within my own high school? This is how a college would know, oh, given this high school and what they offer, this student has elected to take many rigorous classes. Or if they compare it to another profile, to another student, this student has elected to take as many rigorous classes as they can, but their high school doesn't offer that. It also gives them, or the same as others. Maybe some high schools only offer, 10 APs or 5 APs, where some colleges or high schools will offer many AP classes and lots of honors classes and lots of variations and access to dual enrollment. And so it is important to sort of look to how you are stacking up. Also, students are often surprised where they fall in a high school profile. So some high schools elect to share percentile. Where are you compared to others in your class? Are you in number one? Are you number two? Meaning, they may give you a numerical value in that, or are you in a quartile? So how does your own high school stack or evaluate you against others? And some clearly just don't. They just don't subscribe to that, which is perfectly okay. So this is an important piece, I think, that students and families should always look at to just get an understanding of what their high school shares with colleges, and then where you stack up. And this is part of the even playing field. Okay, so how do you recalculate your GPA, right? Let's kind of start out, go back to the basics here before we go through it. You've got some understanding, and oh my goodness, like this, my GPA may not be my GPA in what I thought it was in my evaluation. So recalculatemygpa.com is a great tool, but also we at JRA have our own tool, which is the same thing, but that is going to be part of the downloads tonight, and I'm going to take you through that. So just to sort of recap, because we're going to be talking about this and how do you go about this, there's weighted GPA and unweighted GPA. Weighted is the totality of all courses, but including adding some additional weight, 0.5, 1. And even this is different from high school to high school. So a weighted means that your high school is adding an additional value, and this is the typical additional value for a core class. Unweighted is the totality of all courses that you've taken, but no additional value has been added on to that course. Okay, so the first thing you do is you grab your transcript and all the classes that you take that are complete your total high school program, and they can also include those up through up before ninth grades. There are many of our students who take middle school courses that are used in the calculation of high school. So, okay. So you've got your look through your transcript and just circle all of your English classes, math, social science, etc. Then look for any kind of star or highlight anything that's an AP, IB, ACE, dual enrollment, and even honors, which I don't have on here. And then even some of your computer classes, you can add those as well. But other courses, do not factor those in. Okay. So then what you're going to do is you're going to take all of your classes for the unweighted calculation, and you're going to start assigning them. So even if you have pluses or minuses, you're going to then assign it to either an A, B, C, D, or E, and assign them each points. From there, add all of your points up and divide the total points by the number of those core classes. And then this is going to be the calculation for your unweighted GPA. So pretty much a lot of the colleges use this in calculating unweighted. Let's go on. Now, if you're going to add and calculate your weighted, then you're going to add those half points or 0.5 now for honors, pre-AB, pre-IB, and then or for pre-ACE, or then for AB, IB, and ACE, 1 full point, and then any approved dual enrollment would be 1 full point. And remember, you have to have a C- or better to qualify for the weight points. So that would really calculate to a C. You're going to divide the number of core courses, and that is going to give you your weighted GPA. Now, right, JRA, we're based in Florida, and we work with a lot of our students apply to our Florida colleges, and this is pretty much what our Florida colleges do. However, there's always nuances. And when you look at UF and FSU, it's all of these courses they will look at, regardless of what it is, they will use the 1 point adding for that, but UCF has an approved list. And then both UF, FSU, I think I said, did I say USF? I'm sorry, but I meant FSU. And both of those colleges, along with UCF, have an approved dual enrollment list. So these are things that you want to investigate ahead of either enlisting or enrolling in a course, or by looking at that and thinking about that when you apply to colleges, what your true GPA is. All right. How do you find out all this information, right? Because I'm sharing it with you, but how do you know? Here's a couple of ways, and this is going to be in the download. I always start, and this is never easy, but by looking through a college admissions website. Oftentimes, it's really hard to comb through all this, but with a little patience and due diligence, you can find this information out. So check the college undergraduate website with the college that you're applying for, and within that, search for admissions requirements, how we evaluate students, or if GPA is weighted, unweighted, or recalculated. So try to go through that. Typically, you will see these statements in the, how we evaluate, or on the admissions page, or how to apply. But not all colleges make this very clear or easy to find. Another suggestion I have is to Google or to look for common data set. So each college is obligated to share their common data set, and it's always going to be a lag, a year behind. But in other words, if you look at, it's typically in section C, first year admissions, it does show the GPA range, maybe the rigor of courses, some recalculated information, but it's a great way to get a context of what colleges are looking for and what they looked for in the year before as part of their evaluation. There are, state wide system and policies that you can look through or look at through a state's for your state university systems, meaning the University of California systems, Florida, Georgia. We know how these are all different. And then, when in doubt, I always say you're a consumer, you have the right to contact, email. Listen, students ask me all the time, I'm going to a rep visit at my high school, a representative from a college is coming on my campus. What do I ask them? Or when you go to a college fair, ask an admissions officer, can you tell me, is the GPA that I see on my transcript the GPA that will be used in evaluating me as an applicant? What courses? How is your weighting system? Do you do core? Do you do unweighted? And these are great conversations to have. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful in how to try to find this information. Okay, so if for any reason you have any questions and you've jumped on a little bit late, we are sharing this presentation is being recorded, so you will get a copy of this presentation in your mailbox tomorrow, and I cannot see your questions, but I will be answering them at the end of this webinar. Okay, the UC system is completely different, but very transparent in how they calculate your GPA. So they are only looking at courses completed after 9th grade. They use something called A through G courses. Honors courses must be approved honors courses. IB and AP are included no matter where you took them. And honors out of state courses are not included. And honors weighting may be capped. So, wow, how do you go through that, right? Okay, so these are what, first of all, they're called, that are under their A through G courses. And you can take a look at that. And these are the minimum admissions requirements for A through G courses, but most students exceed these requirements, right? Because typically their graduation requirements are far more extensive than this. And how you're going to do this is very similar to what you're doing with the Florida State universities, but you're going to first have to identify all the courses that are your A through G courses on your transcript, and those that are completed after 9th grade. And then again, go through the task of assigning those and getting them to that A, B, C, D, and assigning them point values. You'll add an extra point for each semester of a UC honors level course for a maximum of 8 points between 10th and 11th grade. And just so you know, if this is a lot to take in, this is part of our downloads too tonight. So you will have these that are further, because when you're applying for these UC schools, you need to have this all in tow. Okay, and then you're going to add the points, and you're going to divide the total points by the number of letter grades earned in courses taken after the summer, after 9th grade through summer, after 11th grade. And then that will give you that minimum GPA for admissions, or that UC calculation, and the minimum GPA for admissions is a 3.4. So any of our students who are applying and are not in state, you need to have that UC GPA calculation of a 3.4 or above. Okay, and then the California State universities, which is different. So, right, UC San Diego would be University of California at San Diego, not to be confused with San Diego State University. So the state university system uses a similar formula, but has a little bit of a lower minimum GPA requirement. So certainly when it comes to applying to any UC or California State University, you're going to be working through extracting your transcript, locating those A through G courses, recalculating so that you know that you're at least at that for the UCs, and you're out of state at least at that 3.4. Okay, wonderful. Let's move forward. Where are you? Other areas where you're going to see or need to be thinking about a recalculated or an adjusted GPA is if you are an athlete. So the National Collegiate Athletic Association, and I'm going kind of by the requirements for Division One. They have their own core courses, weighted advanced courses, GPA calculation, and so on and so forth. So that is based on another kind of an evaluation tool. And this on that website, which I guess you just kind of missed it here on my PowerPoint here a little bit, but that is also on those handouts. So you'll have that in resources. This is their worksheet, and this is great. Their worksheets are so helpful for you because this is the Division One, but on their website they have Division Two and Division Three. But this gives you that, nice little, you can go in and start figuring it out, and then what their approved courses are. So this is another example. When you're an athlete, you want to make sure that all of your classes and courses align with the requirements of the NCAA. Now, oftentimes, right, GPA and scholarships. When students apply to universities as a first-time freshman, oftentimes colleges have a set or established criteria of which they're offering award money. But this is a sample from the University of Missouri. And this is really wonderful. I love how they do this because you really can kind of get in and figure out your GPA, and then and match it to your test score, and then you have a really sort of nice idea of where you're going to land in scholarship, right? And when we're thinking about financial aid and scholarships, right, and affordability, this is good and valuable information to have. But if you notice what they say here, which you have to sort of read it sideways, is that the GPA on your found on your transcript, if it's not on a 4.0 scale, they're going to convert it, and they'll convert it for you. But the GPA that's on your transcript is the GPA that they're using in assessing scholarships. So that's good news. You don't have to recalculate your GPA. You know exactly where you stand from that GPA. But you'd have to go in and read the fine print to understand that for that university. Now, when I was doing a little bit more research for University of Missouri, I noticed that they had a little bit of a different language here when I was going through all of their scholarships. Then under their non-resident student scholarships, if you are applying test optional, that GPA is not going to be the complete GPA alignment. They're going to be looking at the academic performance in their core courses for their review. Talk about a lot of nuances in GPA and knowing your GPA and where it really lies within admissions and all of these layers. Now, The Bright Future Scholarship, very popular for our students in Florida. I'm not going to go into it right now, but just to highlight that this is another example where, in order to qualify for a scholarship at Bright Future Scholarship, it's not about exactly what's found on your transcript. It's about the calculation of these classes to get to this score or this GPA calculation, along with other factors. And I'm excited to announce that my colleague, Kathy Hart, will, she always does a great job with this, will be doing a webinar, I think in early January, on the bright futures and calculation. And she's going to walk you and talk you through all of that in greater detail. But this is just another example of where this varies. Okay. All right, let's look at direct admissions. So one thing that I've been kind of excited about for students of since last year, Common App and colleges sort of got together, and once you start applying to colleges or generate your list or put in all the information of your of your background, into the common application, um, they will, more times than not, you'll see this little indicator on your Common App toolbar that there are direct admissions offers. And these are very exciting. And how are they determined? They can be anything from your geography, where you are, the answers and responses, but also in your grades, cumulative GPA, GPA weighting, or GPA scale can be an indicator for some of these direct admissions overviews. And these have been really nice for the colleges, a nice way for them to get themselves out there and encourage students to apply, because they feel that you are a great candidate. And they do feel that what they're seeing and gathering from the data on your Common App. But this is another example of where your grades, or where they're getting that data from, along with other information. So then I wanted to highlight for you that there are some majors when you're applying to colleges where sometimes they will be looking for a different or more, or a stronger GPA. And you're going to find this in a lot, sometimes in direct admit nursing programs. We see this quite often, where maybe the general GPA range to get into a college may be lower, but the getting into the nursing program, direct admit, has a higher, or a little bit of a more of a standard, higher GPA, or what they're looking for on certain GPA thresholds. Now, this is, in addition to looking at core classes, core GPA, and things like that. But you will find that, and something to be thinking about, asking about, and digging in deeper to learn if there's any threshold or bar that you need to have for that particular college to get into that program. And we see these a lot in accelerated programs, meaning where you can do, a master's degree within, 5 years, a 2+2 program, and other variations of these programs where your GPA in that standard could be, they may want a higher one for that. So I think hopefully you've learned a lot about GPA. Let me tell you a little bit about what's next and what's going on, besides now that you sort of maybe have this realization that your GPA is not maybe what you thought it is, or that you need to be thinking about your GPA in context of so much more than you did. I think one of the things in that, GPA conversation is that we're seeing a lot, colleges are seeing a lot of inflation, and that can be valuable inflation. That doesn't inflation doesn't mean something negative. It can be about students having more access to those AP courses, dual enrollment, ACE programs, AP capstones, honors classes, but also because high schools vary. I have seen high schools that have offered an honors class an even higher weight than another high school. And so, therefore, colleges are seeing higher GPAs over time, right? And so, right, remember that even playing conversation, and where does that all land in all of this? Right, to try to, how does the student at a high school down the road with a 5.0 get into the same college that a student down the road is at another high school and they have a 3.8, right? So that can happen because of the context and all these other kinds of things. But what has come out of some of this? Well, I think this is why we're seeing a lot more students, or a lot more colleges, going back to test mandatory. And right, we saw that with a couple of colleges this year, and every year it seems to hold our breath who's coming back with mandating test scores. And the reason why we're seeing this is because the colleges feel or are saying that the test scores can be a better, or that it gives them a little bit more confidence in maybe your transcript or evaluation, because that it's a tool that they feel that gives a little bit more of that additional reinforcement, and it can fill in the gaps of some transcript questions that they may or may not have. So this is why you're seeing a little bit of what this looks like, of more colleges going back to that. I think you're going to continue to see that. And of course, in a separate conversation, but just as particularly for my sophomores and juniors, I really recommend that you start testing on that, even though there's still a tremendous amount of test optional schools. I definitely feel like it's something that you want to address, because you don't know if that college is going to change. And they do typically announce that in the spring. It's not something that they announce typically right in their admissions during the year, but you want to be able to understand that and know. So, okay, let's just go back here and take a little bit of a look at how do you work through some of this based on what I've just shared. Right, so freshman year is obviously an adjustment period. Your GPA definitely counts here. Your courses and classes definitely count here. Sometimes freshman year can be a rocky road, and any year can be that, but sometimes that transition is a little bit difficult. But I do say to freshmen, remember, this is the start of that calculation. So you do want to make sure that you're taking strong courses. You want to balance rigor with what you can do and what you feel comfortable with, but you do want to get those strong grades. And you do want to start by having a class course schedule that, and typically that happens in ninth grade anyway, but that those core courses are there. And then, colleges do love to see a good uptick. They do like to see a progression. They like to see it, that maybe you start with a little rigor and you're taking on more as you go through, or that your grades are impressively getting better over time. So they do acknowledge that. But keep in mind that sophomore year is a great time to sort of balance whatever happened in freshman year and taking more challenging courses. By the time you get to junior year, remember that junior year final GPA, whether it's weighted or unweighted or how it's calculated, right at the end of the junior year, that assessment, that GPA, whether it's numbers or whatever it is, pluses or minuses, that is what the colleges are going to see, right? Because when you're applying in those early rounds, They see your history through the end of your junior year. And, right, I have to say this, senior year grades really do matter. Now, they're not fully available during that first semester, right? But if you're applying regular decision, if you're deferred, those classes and course grades really do matter. And the colleges really want to say, what are you doing senior year? Because that's a very important year. Even though we don't have the context of that or those grades, we want to know what kind of courses that you're taking. And seniors, do not hit that second semester of senior year and decide that you're just going to take a little bit of a rest there, because the colleges will always tell you that your admissions is contingent on the completion and passing of your courses, and they don't want to see any sort of extreme discrepancies that have happened from the time that they've admitted you until then. And I think it's important to understand that even though we've talked a lot about the focus of the totality of your magical grade point average of 4 years over time or 3 years over time, there are many things that factor into admissions. And beyond the rigorous curriculum, and strong grades, there are all of the other variables, some of which I'd already talked about in terms of reflecting that upward trend and test scores in a college that is looking for that. But obviously, what are the other things that you're doing that you're bringing to the conversation? And so those are your extracurriculars, and then essays and letters of recommendations, and then colleges who track your interest, right? What does that look like? Have you been visiting their campus? Are you talking to the reps? There you go. A demonstrated question or interest can be writing an email and asking about their policies on recalculation. So, any other types of things that you're bringing to the arena are those things that colleges are evaluating. And remember that your GPA doesn't tell the whole story. It tells the beginning story in the admissions review. And I think that's an important piece to understand. And it's important to understand and really sort of take note, make educated decisions on the classes you're taking, the grades that you're getting, and how you're being evaluated. Challenge yourself. In no means am I saying that you need to be taking all APs and all honors, right? If you have a strength, it's perfectly fine to say, listen, history, social sciences, language, or English, that is really my thing. So when it comes to that, I'm going to kind of keep myself as challenged as I possibly can in those classes. But math, I'm not as strong as math. And so maybe I will just, not have to have every class at a certain level. But, look, it all matters. And I think it's so key to be thinking about your colleges early on and asking the colleges about their requirements, seeking updated information, seeking information as it relates to your major. All of these are important conversations. So I hope that was helpful in giving you some context of what the GPA looks like in evaluation in 2025, among other things in college admissions. We do offer many webinars. We've had them. They are all up on our website. If there's any way that any of our consultants can help you in any of the conversations or in any way in your college and post-secondary planning, please feel free to reach out. This is our contact information. And I am now going to minimize my screen and see if there are any questions. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I do see a quick question here. Did you say UF and FSU use all the courses to figure out GPA, not just... No, what I was saying for that, thank you for that great question. It was when it came to dual enrollment courses, or when it came to dual enrollment courses core, it could be based on looking at what they have already set as a course that they will use. But what I was also saying was that if it's they will use all AP, IB, ACE, those in calculating the GPA. So that's a great question. Do out of state schools? Yes. So sometimes that conversation on the ACE is evaluated a little bit differently. But yes, not, I would not say, I'm hesitant to say do all calculate. So yes, the ACE can be viewed as those advanced classes similar to IB and AP. So if it is within the structure of those advanced core classes, then they may calculate based on that. But ACE is also very focused here in Florida. So that would definitely be a question that I would say that you definitely want to make sure that you check with the colleges that you're interested in. It's a great question in showing your demonstrated interest in talking to college reps. So yes, great questions. Is there anything else that I can answer for anybody tonight? Again, my name is Anne LaFemina. You can reach out to me. I'm going to just try to get that in the chat here, and at jraec.com. If you have any questions that I didn't address or want to address unique to your student or family, please feel free to reach out. Okay, well, let's see. I'm just going to just double check. I think if there's anything else here. Well, thank you so much for attending tonight's conversation. And we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Thank you and good night.